Hey there, it's Silver. This is The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. So yeah, this is a pretty big one to do, but I should probably start off by saying, first off, this is not going to be a spoilery video. I've deliberately avoided that. All of the footage that you're going to be seeing, I've mostly recorded stuff like field exploration and combat and things like that. That way I avoid any sort of major story dialogue in the background, or any big cutscenes, or big character reveals, all that sort of stuff. I don't want to show any of that, you know, and one of the character's roots, for instance, I won't be showing at all, because it would be immediate spoilers if I showed any of that, and I'm obviously also not going to be talking about any big reveals in detail, because this video is going to be coming out before the game itself comes out, so I most definitely do not want to spoil anything for anyone, really, as much as I can. So don't worry about spoilers in this video. I will keep it as spoiler light as possible. But what the heck are the Legend of Heroes games? Well, this is a really, really long-running franchise that, unlike a lot of JRPGs, is mostly one cohesive world and story. Something like Final Fantasy, each game is its own individual self-contained story and its own world with its own characters, but these games are all linked together, and they all take place in one narrative. And because of this, there's a bit of intimidation when it comes to actually trying to get into this series. I've seen a lot of people get recommended this, and they think, wow, I have to play like 8+ games to actually be caught up on the story. I don't know if I've got time for that, and I can't really blame them. You know, you get a bit of like choice paralysis because of how long the story actually is up until this point. But in order to help people, my personal advice is find the first game of an arc that looks interesting to you and start there. And if you enjoy it, if you end up liking it, then we can talk about getting into the wider world and understanding the rest of the story, because there are games that are the beginning of their individual story arcs, and they're self-contained enough in terms of their characters and their narrative and stuff that you'll know what's going on if you start there, even if you've never played the previous games. So if you want to play, say, Trails of Cold Steel 1 or Trails from Zero, for instance, those are games that are the first of their individual arcs. You'll be okay if you do that, because they explain enough to get you going, and the story that you're actually going to be following is unique to that arc. However, that advice doesn't really work for this game in particular, because Trails into Reverie is not a self-contained arc so much as it's actually the epilogue of all of the previous arcs coming together at once. So this game actually takes place about 5 months after the end of Trails of Cold Steel 4, and also the end of Trails to Azure, which is the Crossbell arc, a nation fighting for its independence. So you're seeing the sort of payoff of all of the previous stuff all happening, and then this is taking place after all of that. The game actually has a pretty unique structure because it takes place between 3 different groups of party members, and you can switch between them at any point you want, as long as they have more of their story to go. You just press right on the D-pad and it will show you a menu and allow you to switch between the active parties, and they'll all be at different parts of the world doing different things, and you can just, see the same event sometimes from multiple different perspectives and things by switching back and forth. And eventually, if you follow one character's route long enough, they will get locked out, because that's all they can do at this point in the story, and you got to play the others in order to lock those out until you get all 3 of them, at which point the story itself will progress, and then they'll all 3 open up again and you can do it again. So this is a game that's all about following these 3 routes as they go along their own stories. You have one is Lloyd, who is the Crossbell arc's main character, the Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure games. You also have Rain, who is the Trails of Cold Steel games main character, and all of his friends, Class 7 and all those. And you have the mysterious C as the 3rd route. C is an interesting character because the character has existed before. There was a character named C, a masked character, in the Cold Steel games. However, by the end of those games, it was revealed who he actually was. So he didn't need to go by C anymore because everyone already knew. So obviously this C, it wouldn't make sense if it was the same character doing the same thing over again when everybody already knows who he is. So yeah, this is a different C that is taking up the name for a specific reason, and it's sort of part of the arc of that character to figure out who they actually are. And without spoiling the story or anything like that, I will say that these games have a very good story. As far as JRPG stories go, in my opinion, the Trails games are one of the best modern JRPG stories I've actually played through. The story is not your typical chosen one fighting an ancient evil kind of story and is a lot more complicated than that. There basically is no savior in this story. There's no chosen one, and everyone is very flawed and has their own problems, and sometimes the characters' choices that you make throughout the game actually come back to bite them because they're not perfect and they sometimes make mistakes. And in fact, there are even some mentions to some of those mistakes in this game, so it actually pays some of those other choices off. There's a lot of payoff in this game, as you would expect from an epilogue. You see a lot of grown-up characters that you had previously seen in the earlier games. You see a lot of advancement in the world in terms of what has happened since then and things like that. So you're gonna want to play the previous games to play this one simply because it doesn't feel the need to over-explain who these characters are and how they know each other and the state of the world and all that, because you're expected to already know all of that. So the payoffs can actually start happening without a whole bunch of like reminiscence and cutscenes and flashbacks and stuff that would be unnecessary filler for the story. It's all displayed as if you know what's happening, basically. So yeah, the story is good. It involves a lot of political intrigue, things like ancient conspiracies, and also some more modern stuff like cults, and the idea of a nation fighting for its independence, trying to get out from under the foot of other nations that have constantly used it as an excuse to wage war and get more territory and some other things of that nature. So there's definitely a lot going on here in terms of story, and it's quite an interesting series of previous story arcs ending and then coming together to sort of create a new one that is the arc for this game. So it's not just payoff of what happened previously, it's also sort of an evolution of the world's, the state of the world, and the political climate and stuff that's been happening as a result of what happened in the previous games. To put it into perspective, how late this is in the character's journeys, the earliest level in the game where you start is level 98. So you are already very high level when you start this game, and it just keeps going up from there. And of course, game mechanics-wise, these are games, as are a lot of JRPGs, where you have a ton of different battle mechanics that are revealed throughout the games slowly, but since this is at the end of all of that, pretty much all of the mechanics are already in place for you, and they don't get revealed, except for one new one, the United Front system, which I'll get into in a minute. But basically that means you have free reign of the full combat system, the full suite of options, right from the start. So the way the combat system works, if you've never played one of these games, is it's a turn-based combat system, but it uses like a real positioning idea. So it's not like grid-based or anything like that, and the characters don't stand still. They all actually move around, and all spells and skills and stuff will have a radius of some kind that will be physically placed on the field that will show you how much it will affect. So grouping enemies in a line or grouping them together in a circle and things of that nature can help you hit multiple enemies with all of your attacks. So physical positioning is very important in this game. Every character you have has access to, of course, a basic attack, which can be deceptively powerful sometimes, especially during like critical hits and things, and that they also have arts and crafts, as they're called, which is kind of a funny way to put it, but arts are spells and crafts are skills, basically. You will obtain these things called quartz, which are a lot like materia, actually, and you equip them in this sort of cell phone sort of idea, and whatever you equip determines the spells you have access to. No character naturally gets spells by leveling up or anything. Magic is not natural to the people in the game. It's equipped with these quartz only. So you gotta choose what quartz you want, and that determines what spells you'll be able to use in battle, both offensive and defensive and healing and all that stuff. They all come from this system. Crafts, however, these are the skills that the character actually has naturally, and these will be gained mostly from leveling up. Every character will start with several because everyone is quite a high level in this game, but there's still plenty of room to level up more and gain more crafts, as well as upgrades on previous crafts to make them stronger and have extra effects and stuff. Although there are also some crafts occasionally for certain characters that will happen after certain story events. So most of the crafts you'll get are from leveling up, but a couple here and there are from passing certain thresholds in the story that will power the characters up in some way instead. In battle, characters have the usual health gauge, but they also have EP, which is basically MP. This is what you use for casting arts, and these cost of arts scales up very fast. So like the tier 1 Firebolt art might cost you like 30 EP to cast, whereas the tier 3 Big Cannon art will cost you like 240 or something like that. So the costs scale up really, really fast, and you gotta be careful about that because the super powerful flashy spells that are available later on are extremely expensive to cast, but of course, if you manage to get all the enemies in a place where they'll all be hit by it, they can be very effective. And the game does have an elemental weakness system, of course. Enemies can be resistant or weak to every element in the game, and some of the elements are a bit odd. You have the usual 4, air, which also includes lightning, water, which includes ice, fire, and earth. But there are also 3 others that are available, which are a bit different. They are time, space, and mirage. And these work quite a bit differently and often have some really unique status ailments and things they can inflict. So they're quite valuable to use, but spells of that nature also tend to be pretty expensive to cast. In order to use crafts, instead you need craft points, and these are not gained by resting or anything like that. The only way to gain craft points is to actually deal damage with other stuff, to use attacks and spells to deal damage that will get you some craft points, and you spend these on your various skills that are available unique to each character. And there are also S-crafts, which are basically limit breaks. These consume all of the craft points you have. You have to have a minimum of 100 to cast them, but no matter how much you have, they'll use all of them. And you can hold up to 200 craft points, and if you use an S-craft with 200, it will actually make it stronger. So there's a reason to get all the way up to the highest threshold you can before casting them. But these are, of course, your big flashy moves that have like cinematics and stuff and are super powerful. Usually characters have multiple they can choose from, but the cool thing about these is once they're available, you can actually interrupt the enemy's turns and cast them whenever you want. So if a character has at least 100 craft points, you can use a button combination to call up their attack next, even if it's not going to be their turn, so that you can sort of force them to take a sudden turn to cast their limit break, basically, which is pretty cool. Sometimes when you hit an enemy, that will also become unbalanced, and it will flash on screen the type of damage you did to unbalance it, and this allows a character that they're linked to. Every party member can be linked to another party member. You can choose whichever one you want. There's no like limitation on it. And when this happens, the linked character gets a free attack on them, but you can also choose to spend some of these brave points in the upper right of the screen in battle to do a much more powerful attack, or to do an all-out full party attack it costs like all your points to do that though. But doing the normal attack gives you a point instead, so this is what you do to build up that gauge. And you mostly use this gauge for these opportunity attacks and also for brave orders. During anyone's turn in battle, you can press up on the D-pad, and it will show you a list of these things called brave orders that all of your characters in battle have at least one, usually 2 of, and also all of your support characters that aren't in battle, they'll also show up here and can assist with brave orders. These are big passive boosts of some kind. They're like skills that do something immediate and also have a multiple turn long effect they give everyone in battle. They tend to be really strong. They can be everything from like a 45% flat damage increase across the board, or a 50% damage reduction for a certain number of turns, or giving everyone reflect or something like that. They are very important in the tougher battles because the combat in this game actually does get quite hard, as you can probably imagine with all these complicated systems working together. The bigger bosses and elite enemies and things do actually get very challenging. So using stuff like the Brave Order system and the unbalancing system and all that stuff is important to actually be able to survive. And in addition to all of that stuff, which has existed in the previous games, this game also introduces the United Front system. This requires 5 characters, so you gotta have a full battle party of 4, as well as 1 person assisting in the support slot. But if you have at least 5 characters, you can do this, and you just hold the right trigger down and press one of the face buttons on someone's turn, and it will do something. It takes this purple gauge that you mostly get from breaking stuff in the world while you're exploring, and once this gauge has at least 1 segment full, you can use this UF system. And there is a UF heal that gives everyone a nice like 50% heal full party, and some other bonuses like increasing your defense and stuff like that, so it's a really good defensive option. There's also a United Front Arts system where everyone casts a spell based on the master quartz they have equipped. Master quartz are big quartz that go in their own slots that give you multiple spells instead of just the one of other quartz, and they also have a whole host of passives and stats they give you and some other powerful stuff like that. They actually level up separate to your characters. They have their own experience gauges. And you've also got a United Front attack that causes everyone to do a big sort of Persona all-out attack kind of thing that does a ton of damage to everything, especially stagger damage, which is very important on the harder enemies, and ups your offensive stats for a while afterwards. And also, all of the United Front attacks you can do give you several brave points. I think 2 brave points every time. So yeah, the whole game's combat system is definitely complicated as far as JRPG combat goes, but it's fun. It's a really good combat system. It's flashy, it's slick, and it's not too time-consuming. It's enjoyable, and it's tactically interesting because it keeps you thinking, since some of the harder fights can actually get very challenging in this game, allowing you to make specific builds with certain sets of quartz and stuff like that to actually overcome specific enemies is actually something you may have to do, especially on the higher difficulties. Another thing that's unique to this game is the Reverie corridor. Now, the Reverie corridor is a major mechanic in this game. It's something that existed previously in the Cold Steel games, but that's not the same thing as this one. That was like a story point. This is called the true Reverie corridor to set itself apart, and it's basically a place outside of time. Shortly into the game, you'll gain access to it, and the cool thing about this is it's basically randomly generated dungeons that you can run, and all of the equipment and stats and levels and stuff that you get carry over to all the characters you used in their story. So if you are having trouble on like a boss or something, you can go into this corridor and grind up a little bit if you feel like it, and then go back and you'll get to keep all the stuff that you obtained. So it's sort of a way to get stronger mid-story if you want to, and the cool thing about the corridor is you can form a party from all of your characters, even characters that aren't currently part of the same group or working together. They all exist within the corridor, and you can form custom parties from every single person that you've met so far. So in a lot of JRPGs, your main party consists of like 7 or 8 people oftentimes. In this game, we're pushing about 50, so there are a lot of characters you can find, and you can make your own parties however you want and go through the corridor with your own custom set of dungeon crawling parties. And the corridor has its own set of mechanics, like you can find these experience bottles. Basically, they're droplets that give a ton of experience to someone so that you can level up other characters you maybe haven't been using as much. You can sort of power level them by using these consumables on them. The only limitation is whoever your maximum level character is, you can't surpass that with the experience consumables. You can only surpass that through battles. So if you've got someone at 115 and that's the highest character you have, then you can level everyone else up to 115 with those droplets, but otherwise you'll have to go into battles to surpass that limit. As you're exploring the corridor and facing off against its more tough enemies, you'll also occasionally find these sealed stones you can bring back to the sort of hub area of the corridor, and these are kind of like a gacha system, honestly, which I didn't expect. Some of them have consumable items, equipment and stuff in them that you can get, so it's almost like getting a bunch of treasure chests at once. Some of them give you new mini-games to play and new memories to look at. The memories are story bits that also have some playable battles and things in them, and often give you more context on what's been happening in the 5-month gap after Trails of Cold Steel 4 in this game, and they often also give you some unique rewards, including costumes for related characters and stuff. And you can also find these gold stones that actually give you new characters to put in your party. These are pretty interesting because some of these characters haven't normally been all that playable before, but now you can actually take them into your custom dungeon crawling party and play as them. They don't follow you into the story. The story is separate, but you can still use them in the corridor as much as you want. And if you're looking for that classic JRPG thing where there's always like a minigame or two to play, this game has a lot of minigames. Not only is there a major system of actually unlocking new minigames to play with their own rewards, but there are some other sort of fan favorite minigames that are returning, including an entire card game. So we're going back to the days of like Triple Triad, basically. Like it's an actually relatively complicated card game that you can build custom decks for and everything in this game. So in terms of content, there's a lot of content in this game. The story is very long. It's got 3 routes through a whole bunch of different paths, and you've got the whole corridor system, which will slowly expand as you go throughout the story more and more to become longer and longer and more difficult sets of dungeons to take on with more characters to find and unique equipment to find and stuff like that. I'm only really scratching the surface on a lot of the mechanics because we'd be here all day if I wanted to like explain everything in great detail, but suffice to say, this is a very complex JRPG that does a lot of things right. It's got a very good story, in my opinion, that follows after the very good stories have ended of the previous arcs and manages to keep that momentum going into a story that is at least as interesting, in my opinion, and has some good character moments and a lot of development for these characters, and you also get to pay off all the development they've already had. Like, for instance, I'm not a huge fan of Reen as a character, not how he started in Trails of Cold Steel 1. I found him to be like an obnoxious harem anime protagonist, but by the end of Cold Steel 4, he was a much more interesting, well-rounded character, and you get to, see more of him like that post that game in this game. So for fans of the Legend of Heroes games, this is an absolute must-play. This is a really good epilogue to all of the previous arcs coming together while also maintaining its own story that manages to push into new interesting territory as well, and also set up for the Kuro no Kiseki games, the next series of games that are taking place after this, and they're not currently officially localized, but there are 2 of them currently, and they have a really interesting protagonist as well, in my opinion. I really like his sort of mature more private investigator vibe. I think he's going to make a really interesting protagonist. So yeah, this is definitely a must-play if you are at all invested in this game series, because it has so much payoff in it that's actually really fun to see. It's cool to see a lot of these characters a little bit later on and what has happened to all of them and how they've changed, and even be able to use a lot of them in a new sort of improved version of the combat system with all kinds of bells and whistles that keep it interesting. If you've never played one of these games, this is not the one to start with. It does not explain almost anything about what happened in the previous games in enough detail to get you up to speed without having actually played them. But as a whole, I would say this series, the Trails series, is worth playing. They are actually very good JRPGs, so if you're at all a fan of this genre and you're looking for something new and you've never really ventured into this space, you've never played one of these, definitely give it a try, because the series is honestly great, and this game is a really, really awesome capstone to look forward to once you have obtained the context of the greater world and story from the previous games that lead up to it. So, I think I'll end it off there before we get into any sort of spoilery territory. Thank you guys very much for watching. I will link the Steam store page down in the description below this video as always, so that you can go and check the game out yourself. It'll be coming out quite soon. I believe the 7th is its release date, so look forward to that. It's definitely a really well-localized, excellent installment in a very good JRPG series that I think more people should hear about. I'm a fan of looking into the more obscure side of RPGs like this, and these games, while not super obscure, are also not super mainstream either, so they occupy this really interesting niche that I feel more people should be aware of. So I'll see you guys next time.